Okay, in this presentation, I'm going to be using a trip to Uganda, which emphasized bird watching and gorilla watching to demonstrate the benefits of ecotourism. Now, tourism obviously in itself has a lot of advantages. It is filled with new and unforgettable experiences. I always find that when I'm traveling, my mind is really engaged, especially if what I'm seeing is unfamiliar to me. You tend to try to figure out what's going on, and that makes you question. And those questions often bring new ideas into your mind. It helps you understand a new culture or an environment, and it develops some empathy for those that you're visiting. However, ecotourism can do a lot more. Now, ecotourism has a benefit to nature as well as to you as a traveler. It encourages the community, the local people, to value their nature, while at the same time, it improves the lives of those people that you're visiting. So ecotourism should be a win-win-win-win experience. You as a traveler win through your own experiences. Locals win through money that you infuse into their economy. This money helps improve the well-being of the local population and helps them realize the value of protecting nature. And because they're protecting nature, the environment wins through the conservation efforts that are encouraged by your travels. And finally, the world wins because the interaction between the tourists and the locals creates greater understanding and appreciation of each other. And when I think of ecotourism, I realize that our own Urban Ecology Center shares many of the same objectives that ecotourism has. The Urban Ecology Center, for example, tries to expose our community to nature, to educate, and to especially educate the young. And the programs of the Urban Ecology Center going into the schools reinforces the science, the ecology, and it helps encourage a protection of the health of the environment. The Urban Ecology Center also teaches the relationship between humans and nature and what we can be doing to help protect our environment. Everything from picking up litter to how do we stop runoff into the waters. It also teaches us about good stewardship of the land, how we can help restore our environment to a more natural state. I've noticed recently how much the Urban Ecology Center is doing to fight against invasive plants and to plant native plants. So both the ecotourism and the UEC are trying to protect, preserve, and conserve our natural spaces. So the question is, why is ecotourism so valuable? Well, you learn to appreciate and encourage the environment that you need to conserve. It builds a relationship as you learn about the people that live near the natural settings that you're exploring. It encourages you to show respect for the people that you're visiting and to show friendly interest in them and learning about what their life is like and what are the things that they are dealing with. Just like anywhere that you go, if you're going to a national park, there are certain things you need to be mindful of. To pack in and pack out whatever you bring. To respect the wildlife, to respect the natural environment so that others can enjoy it into the future. It also encourages the hiring of locals by staying in local owned and run establishments, by hiring local guides. You do your part to help the locals value and benefit from the environment that they need to protect. We'll also find out it encourages conservation by providing park fees that help the locals in many, many ways. So how do we make the biggest impact with our tourist dollars? First off, I personally try to hire local travel agents to organize my trips. This means that less money is going to an overseas or an out-country agency to plan, but also because the local agencies seem to understand what can be seen in a given amount of time. They'll help you customize an itinerary to your particular interests, focusing on what you want. They can make suggestions of things not to be missed, but you really have control. I use the Kajang safaris to organize our tour. We spent almost 2 weeks. And you can see the vehicle in the middle is one of the types of vehicles that we have traveled in, which has a pop-up roof, making it easy to see the wildlife without being in danger. But it also is a fairly small vehicle, which means that your group is going to be fairly small, which has many advantages as well. I always try to hire local guides and, where possible, stay in lodges and hotels that are owned by the locals. I'll talk a little bit more about this as we go on. One of the things I have found about hiring a local guide is that they are very proud of their country, and they're really eager to share what they know and share about their culture. Most speak excellent English, but you can get a real inside view of their culture. They are happy to answer all your questions about family, marriage, customs, religion, etc. And my wife always has lots of questions. I always try to hire a bird guide. That's my particular interest. But if you have another special interest, the travel agent will pair you with a guide of that interest. The bird guides are excellent at identifying by ear as well as visually, and they'll do everything possible to make sure you get a good view. Often they'll stop and make sure that you have seen the bird and you're satisfied with what you have seen. They also tell you a little bit about the birds so that you're feeling like you're getting to know, not just check off a bird as you see it. There's also a network of local birders that they access, and we've found that they often will find things before we get there, and then the local guide that we'll hook up with will quickly bring us to find a bird that might have taken hours otherwise to track down. There was one example of a unique owl that we were looking for, and the local farmers had considered the owl a bad omen, and in the past might have chased it away. But a local bird enthusiast has taken it upon himself to educate the local farmer and give him a financial tip to keep track of their location. The farmers appreciate the money, and they learned that the owl really benefits them and their farms as they hunt some of the natural pests. The guides are well-versed and well-trained, many of them having taken academic as well as field classes, and they will often know your guidebook so well that they can tell you where on a particular page you're going to find this bird that you're looking at. It's quite amazing. Now, these are some of the guides that I have used on trips. The guides really do benefit. It's one of the more lucrative jobs in their countries. The guide that's not pictured, our Uganda guide, was earning enough money that he could send his son to a good boarding school. His income was great enough and was a lot better than most in his community. And of course, since he was out in the field often, the boarding school also became a practical necessity for his lifestyle. Now in the middle, you see a picture of our Mindo guide. In the center, he had a special needs daughter, and because of the income that he earned, he was able to afford her therapy. Now, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see our vehicle with the pop-up roof, but you'll also notice that there were 2 UEC members that accompanied me on this trip. The third from the right is Dennis Casper, you know, as the Riverside Thursday recorder of a lot of the birds that are seen. And of course, next is me, and then to my right, well, it's my left, but to the right of me is Carolyn Washburn, also a long-time UEC member. Well, small group travel definitely has its advantage. It's very flexible. It can adapt to your experiences, your times, your interests. You can spend more time doing something you're interested in and avoid some of the things that you may not want to do. I have been on other tours where we had to shop and stop at little local craft type stores. And while I don't mind doing that occasionally, it is not something that I want to spend a lot of my travel time doing. So, what can I tell you about Uganda? Uganda is a landlocked country. The British colony dubbed it the Pearl of Africa. Today, this term is still used with pride to represent the natural beauty and biodiversity that makes it the Pearl of Africa. Uganda, though, is a very densely populated nation. It's slightly smaller than the state of Oregon, which has a population of 4.2 million people. While you can see Uganda's population is over 10 times what Oregon's population is. It's also a very poor nation, as shown by the per capita income on the right. The country is very proud of their nature, and the national insignia on the right includes many references to the flora and fauna of their country. Notice the waves in the blue kind of triangle shape at the top. That represents Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is on the southeastern border of the country and is believed to be, it is, the source of the Nile River. The river at the bottom of the emblem is supposed to signify the rivers that feed the Nile. The sun in the middle represents the abundance of sunlight, being that they are located straddling the equator. The Uganda kob on the left represent abundant wildlife, while the bird to the right and pictured to the left is the gray-crowned crane, which is their national bird. I do want to point out that all the pictures that are included are my own pictures, except for one or two that will be noted as we go along. The spears and the drum on the emblem represents Uganda's ancient kingdoms. And on the land towards the bottom, the sprig on the left represents coffee, while the white flower on the right represents cotton, two of the major cash crops of Uganda. Now you can see a full map on the left of Uganda, but on the right represents the part of Uganda that we visited. We flew into Entebbe, and Kampala is the capital, and then we circled going through several national parks. Each park in a different environment, different bird life, different wildlife, and then we continued along our way. Now, you have to understand, having 2 weeks or under 2 weeks makes it impossible to see all of Uganda, but we did get to see quite a bit thanks to the guides and to the local travel agent. What looks like a rather short distance, altogether it's around 800 miles, turns out to be a rather long distance because speed is not something that you can do on these local roads. Many of the roads are potholed, and some of the roads, well, in fact, all the roads go through multiple towns, and every single town has speed bumps as you come in, traffic through the town, speed bumps as you go out, and even between towns, it's hard to average much more than 30 miles per hour. There are also occasional police roadblocks to check vehicle registrations, and in some countries to check passports. Now, this was one of the first stops. We often made little stops along the way before we got to an overnight stay. And this little private nature park, we were able to do some birding. You can see 3 of my favorite birds from this location. And whenever you're birding, it's impossible not to view the other wildlife. And you can see the family of hippos. There was a big sign telling us not to go much closer because hippos are known as one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. Now, my favorite bird is this one in the middle, the great blue Torco, which is often nicknamed the lipstick bird because of the red around the tips of the beak, the bill. It's a rather large bird. It's about 28 to 30 inches long from head to toe, and they're rarely found on the ground. They're not particularly good flyers, but they kind of hop their way up to the top of the tree, and that's where you'll find them most often. If they do have to fly, they kind of fly and glide off the top to another tree and then work their way up that tree. The first national park we spent some time in, we spent a day and a half, was Queen Elizabeth National Park. The environment here is very savanna like, but there are also a couple of lakes. So you got to see bird life and wildlife that like the water, but you also saw quite a few birds. These are some of the birds that I was able to get pictures of. Beautiful lilac-breasted roller, one of my favorites. You know, today Tim was talking about beautiful, colorful birds. Well, this is definitely one of them. Our guide was very good about telling us about each bird that we would view. For example, this hammerkop. The hammerkop is an unusual bird because of the nests that it builds. That's right, nests, plural. Each season, it will grow 4 to 7 nests, and each nest is up to 5 feet across. And the studies have found that they use over 8,000 sticks to build this nest. Occasionally, they have to abandon a nest if a predator is attacking them or attacking their nests, and that's why they have those other nests. They will quickly abandon a nest in favor of one that is not being attacked by predators. And as I said before, you can't help but see a lot of other wildlife. These are some of the 11 species of primates that we got to see. The chimpanzee on the top left is becoming pretty rare in the wild. There is one park that is a protected park, particularly for chimpanzees, and there are studies and protection being done in that park. They're very noisy. That's really what gives them away, because when they're up in the trees, you often kind of walk right by not seeing them. The golden monkey off to the top right is also a fairly rare monkey, but not rare are the owl baboons. They're all over the place, sometimes in towns, sometimes at your lodge. In fact, one time at our lodge, we had hung out our shirts and things to dry, and we came back, which was a mistake to leave those shirts unattended, and my wife's pink shirt was missing. We spent a lot of time looking for baboons with pink shirts, but we never found one. The host monkey, the third from the bottom left, has a very, very limited range. It is typically found in high primary forests in very moist tropical type conditions. The black and white colobus off to the right are very beautiful, but that beauty has been a hindrance to them because in the past they were hunted for their furs. Those furs were particularly valued as a sign of respect, and the local chieftains often had robes made from them. Fortunately, the population is on the rebound. One of the pleasures of small group travel is meeting the locals. Since there are only on our trip, this particular trip, 4 of us, we wouldn't overwhelm a local population if we got out and had contact. You can see off to the left, my wife sharing photos of animals that we had been taking, as well as some pictures that she took of them. They were very excited to see the pictures of themselves as well as the animals. Off to the right, some boat craftsmen. They weren't demonstrating, they were actually doing their job, and as you'll notice, with only hand tools. On the bottom right, motorcycles are very common for transport. It's much more affordable than any other vehicle. This fella had lost the load that was tied to his motorcycle, and we stopped to help him pick up the load and right his vehicle and retie his load to the vehicle. These experiences are things that we won't ever forget. Now we're coming to Burundi impenetrable forests, the home of more than half of the world's endangered mountain gorillas. Burundi Park is run by the Uganda Wildlife Authority, which runs almost all the national parks in Uganda, as well as the wildlife reserves and sanctuaries. But if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll notice their budget. The budget is just over $35,000 to run all of these parks, to pay all of the employees of the parks. Obviously, this is not adequate. So that's where ecotourism helps. The budget is not sufficient. So they depend on revenue generated from park fees. The fee that a foreigner will pay is significantly higher than what a local will pay. This money helps the park system. It also helps make the entrance fees for locals to be low enough that they can afford it. Obviously, it's subsidized by the foreign tourists. You'll also notice that the gorilla permits are quite expensive. In fact, it is now the biggest revenue source of all the park system. And this revenue source is really where they end up paying for the workers, the guides, the trackers, the programmers, kind of like the UEC programmers. They have developed school programs, much like the UEC has, where they teach about conservation and the importance of wildlife and the importance of the park. And each day they invite a school, one of the local schools, to come and meet the tourists that are there to see the gorillas. And this is
We breathe in your air, we feel your water moisture, we
Well, obviously you can see that they are being taught about the importance of the national park and how the money from the park is benefiting them and what they can do to protect the parks. They're taught not to go into the parks to retrieve firewood, etc. The goal is really to create an ally for the park. The children themselves are being taught that lesson, but they also bring that lesson back to their families and help spread the goal of managing the parks. Now, here we are getting ready to go trek into the park. Our park ranger is waiting for a tracker to locate and call in the location of our guerrilla group. Usually there are 6 or 7 groups that go out each day, and the trackers go early in the morning to find out where the grass has been matted down, where the guerrilla groups had slept overnight. Then they start tracking where they went to as the morning rose, and they continue tracking until they find the location. Then you can see, it looks like a gun, but the ranger to the left has a walkie-talkie where he picks up the location of our guerrilla group. Now, there are a total of 13 guerrilla groups that are visited, but no more than 7 are visited in any particular day. So all the guerrilla groups do get several days a week where they're not observed. There are about 50 groups in all, but only 13 are tracked and are visited. These groups are all considered safe in terms of having experienced tourists before, and they don't seem to get particularly skittish. Well, when you do get to see your guerrilla group, the ranger will establish how close you can get. And you can get pretty darn close, as you can see from this picture. This is the alpha male. The alpha male is the unchallenged leader. The other males have to stay out on the perimeter. They're not allowed, at least adolescent males, are not allowed to interact with the females of the group. So the alpha will have several females that he is surrounded by, and the children are all protected by the entire group. The children are really fun to watch. They'll often roughhouse and wrestle and play. Even some of the little ones will challenge their older siblings. And when they get, you can see him practicing beating his chest, they're also practicing the activities that an alpha might demonstrate. Whoops. Now, our group, you get to spend an hour visiting your group, and our group comprised about 15 individuals, and as I scan, you can see them spread out through the forest here. They have come, some of them have come fairly close to us, but most will kind of watch a little warily. But it is a treat to watch them. Really an amazing experience. As we were getting ready to leave, we noticed that there was a university student who was studying one of the groups, and there are many universities that have agreements with Burundi to send their graduate students to do studies of the gorilla population. Well, Yadal has obviously created jobs in the park. But in addition to all the park jobs, there are many other jobs that are created for the locals. Most of these jobs are providing some kind of a service to the tourists that visit. Because of this location, there is no way that you can get here and not stay overnight. In fact, most people are going to stay a minimum of 2 nights in the town. So the local lodges create a lot of jobs for locals. This is a picture of our lodge in Burundi. It's within walking distance of the entrance to the park office. It had a nice sitting area out in the patio, and inside there was a dining hall. You get 3 meals a day. Very picturesque grounds, able to actually do some bird watching right from the veranda of our room. You can see how picturesque many of the locations of these lodges are. Some of the lodges, you have your own private cottage. You can see that even though we are staying in mid-range accommodations, they are very comfortable. They offer varied types and scenery. You can see on the left, that's our own private pool in at our cottage. And what you can't see is about 15 feet from our pool is a barbed wire fence that is what separates us from the wildlife in the park itself. Now, the local parks, the local lodges have formed a consortium and have agreed to buy from local farmers. In the past, they had food shipped in from the capital, which is 8 hours away. But by forming the consortium and buying from the locals, it has created a lot of opportunities for the locals to make money. There was also a very interesting local cooperative that was established by a local student who had earned a scholarship to study agriculture at an English university. He decided that he could make a big impact if he would establish a cooperative in his own community. So he returned home, and his cooperative trains women HIV survivors and relocated Batwa, or pygmies. And with the financial support of an international investment corporation, the cooperative got started. It doesn't compete with farmers. It grows things that the locals don't. For example, off to the right, you can see these sacks are inside a barn-like structure, and these sacks are growing mushrooms. Mushrooms have a huge profit margin, about 1,800%. And this helps, obviously, the money to pay the locals that are trained to work in it. You can also see that they are beginning to establish a fish farm, and they hope to grow tilapia so that the lodges have a local fish source. A new primary school and a secondary school have been built in the village. In the past, our guide who grew up in this town told us he had to walk about 5 miles to the nearest secondary school. He also told us he would carry his shoes because he didn't want them to get dirty, and because he said he's not used to wearing shoes and they felt very uncomfortable. But now, thanks to a mutual aid program funded by the lodges and the national park, there's a local high school. Living standards are slowly improving. However, there's still a long ways to go. You can see some of the local children that are going to a religious school, private school, that gets donations from people who have visited. You can see many of them have the names of donors that have provided money, and in return they are honored by having their name on the desks. Local handicrafts also benefit. They now have a market selling their crafts to the foreign tourists. We also noticed that there was an international NGO, a non-government organization called Guerrilla Doctors, which funds a veterinarian who's brought in to help with the health needs of the gorillas. They will go in and make sure that the gorillas are in good health. They sometimes inoculate them, but they all they are there on behest of the NGO and funded by the NGO. But they also help the locals. They do provide veterinarian services for a modest fee in the community. The Batua, formerly called pygmies, a pejorative term, live in the forest, at least lived in the forest, but they were relocated by the park to land provided by the government. Now most are being assimilated to the community. They are receiving an education in the schools, in the public schools. They are being taught how to farm and being provided with equipment and things for farming. Not all are tremendously happy about the change, but they do seem to be adapting. The local elders try to keep their culture alive, and they do try to teach their community, but they also talk to the tourists about what their community was like in the past and what they're doing now. They also showed us how they would make fires in the past and how they would use the smoke from the fires to smoke out the bees so that they could harvest the honey. Bananas are a major cash crop. They use bananas for everything from making liquor to plantain, which is used almost like a local cereal. There have been a number of studies done about how the gorillas had benefited by the establishment of tourism. One of the things that they have found is that the locals are no longer encroaching on the park for agriculture. They're not going into the park to retrieve wood, and they're helping the police stop and catch poachers. So there's a real synergy thanks to ecotourism. And the studies have indicated that the mountain gorilla population, which had dwindled to around 500, is now growing, and it's growing at a modest pace, but it is now over 700 gorillas. Now, this mountain is on the southern border of Uganda. In fact, the tallest mountain here is the point where three countries come together. To the left and away is Rwanda, and to the right is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And of course, we are in Uganda, taking a look at this scene from our lodge. From our lodge, we took a number of boat trips to see animal life. On one of the boat trips, our guide stopped and bought these fish from a local fisherman. We didn't know why, but he told us to point our cameras out about 30 feet. And then, as you can see, he threw a fish into the water. And what happened? A fish eagle. Wow, that was an amazing sight, retrieving the fish. The national bird I talked about earlier, we caught doing its mating dance, mating ritual. And on a lot of the islands in the lake, there were cormorants and other birds nesting or colonizing the area. This bird is a bare-faced go-away bird named after its South African cousin because of its call, at least its cousin's call, is a harsh, go away, go away. And that sound is what their name came from. Fortunately, the Uganda bird, it has a much friendlier sound, and it was very pleasant to see him at close range. Here are some other pictures. This bird, this lapwing, lays its eggs right on the ground. And you can see the speckling does camouflage it, but the real protection from predator is a distraction technique. The adult will stay 20, 30 feet away, and if a predator is seen, he will make a showy, fussy, raucous gathering attention of the predator away from the egg and towards him. The last major national park we went to was Mumboro. Sometimes the parks require you to take a local guide with you. I mean, a national park guide as well. Creates more jobs. And this park had a lot of wildlife. The African wild water buffalo, it's different than the Asian domesticated buffalo. You can see the horns on the top of its head are almost fused together. They form a shield that is referred to as a boss. And when they get into fights, they will butt shield against shield. Whoops. Let's see. This is a Nile crocodile. It has kind of a yellowish and green striping on their sides. The open mouth is not a warning sign or anything like that. It's actually a cooling technique. We saw quite a few elephant groups. Whenever there's a group of elephants, you know that it is females and children. The males do not stay in the group. Occasionally, they will be in a small bachelor group, or more often, the males are just on their own. But the females are a matriarchal troop, and they will take care of all the children, not just their own children. And you can usually find the children between adults who are there in part to protect them and in part to keep them herded in. You can see the pop-up roof in this picture, and that really enables you to get quite close to animals that you might not want to otherwise get so close to, like this lion. These are other animals. On the right is a young impala, giraffes, and like I said before, you can get very close to the animals. Now, these animals are domesticated, ankole. The ankole is a cow that has been prized. It's a real symbol of wealth. It's often required by those that are more affluent as a dowry in marriage. The horns are huge. You would think, oh boy, that's too heavy. They must weigh them down, but they are actually hollow and are also a cooling technique because the hollow horns dissipate the heat that is expelled from the head. As I mentioned earlier, it's right on the equator, and tourists passing usually stop at the equator and often take the obligatory photo standing at the equator. Among the birds that we saw, this beautiful bird, which is usually found in small flocks. The sacred ibis has been pictured for thousands of years. In the pharaoh's time, the god Thor was a picture of an ibis who was worshipped often by sacrificing ibis to this god. The largest flying bird in Africa, the Kori bustard, it's not the largest bird, it's the largest flying bird. Obviously, ostriches are larger. This bird is also known as the white-bellied stork. The tawny eagle has a lifespan of around 16 years. However, the oldest recorded tawny eagle lived in the wild for 60 years, 60. Here we have a bee eater in their caves in the mud, and to the right, a appropriately named superb starling. None of Africa's hornbills are seriously threatened. The corsair to the right is classified as a wader. However, they inhabit deserts and arid regions, so they're not really wading. To the right, the barbet is a bird that typically nests in tree cavities, as shown here. My eBird list grew significantly by my trip to Uganda, 198 birds. And then when we went to Kenya, we spotted 572 birds, not all of them new to me, but still a significant number of birds located there. We're now in the capital towards the end of our journey. You can see how motorcycles are a major means of transport. They're even a taxi system. Here we see a whole family on the motorcycle. There are 8 people. I know you only can see 7 heads, but if you look, Okay, right here, you have a running jacket and somewhere behind the head of the 8th person. Now, this is not one of my pictures, but you can see they transport almost anything on these motorcycles. These are some pictures of Kampala, a city of 1.7 million people. And now we are going for our target bird. One of the birds that I really came to Uganda to find. It's found in the marshes, so we hired a local boat guide to find the target bird. And someone spotted the bird, and all of a sudden there was a rush of boats heading towards the bird. And there he is, our shoebill stork. Now, the shoebill is one of the most coveted birds among birders. It looks rather prehistoric in appearance. It almost looks like it survived from the dinosaur age. Without doubt, it's one of the weirdest birds on the planet. Our guide and 3 of the 4 of us. And this is kind of an example of a ecotour. An ecotour should focus on unadulterated and pristine natural environments. Did it? Yes. Did it help build cultural and environmental awareness? It certainly did. It encouraged positive experiences for me as well as for the host locals. It boosted employment and financial opportunities for the local people. And it encouraged long-term conservation efforts by providing a financial benefit in its favor. Now, the UEC also does Ecotour Trips, and I'd encourage you to look into them. They have a couple of trips under consideration. They're hoping to do a fall trip to Duluth. And as earlier Tim mentioned, they're hoping to do a Costa Rica trip if the COVID can be contained and trips can be safe. When I do eco trips, I try to get people to come with me, not so that I'm making money directly, but if you look in the middle of the page, if just my wife and I would go, this is how much we'd each pay. If I can get 3 more participants, we're down to $3,000. So the saving is really one of the motives. Plus, I like having the company and the camaraderie. So I'm organizing a trip to Ghana, I hope in early 2022, but I started planning this trip before COVID, so I'm not sure whether it will really happen or not. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
That was great, Sonny. Thank you, Mitch. Both of you.
Ow. Oh, God. I've got to get up.
Oh, did I put you to sleep?
That's so cool that you've done all that.
And
that one,
Us.
what was that one bird? The roller?
Yes, the lilac roller. A lot of times when their feathers are not puffed up like this, they pull them down and you only kind of see a lilac color.
Whoa.
But when it's like in the morning and they're trying to stay warm, or sometimes it's just when they're preening, they kind of go into this colorful display.
So
It's a
cool.
beautiful bird.
So I don't know, Ethan, whether there were any other questions that came up.
Are there any questions that people have? I think we all could look at the bird photos for forever. I'm sure you have thousands of more photos.
Literally, in fact, daily
Yeah.
while COVID started, I would post a bird a day. And a little bit of background information. You know, even though you see thousands of birds, not all the pictures are very good. So I think I had about 300 that I posted.
Wow.
It looks like we do have a question. We've heard about how our own national parks are being loved to death. Is this an issue at some of these places?
Well, in the Gorilla Park, no. They limit the number of permits that they give out. And it's partially self-limited because not everybody can afford $600 per person to get a permit, but it's also limited because they only offer, I think it's 60 to 70 permits a day.
Sure.
So at least in that park, I did not run into large crowds, but you know, obviously the locals don't have the wherewithal, even if they can afford the park entrance, they can't often afford the time away from their work. So it's mostly foreigners that are traveling and a few well-to-do locals.
Did you do the David Attenborough with the gorillas? How close did you get to them?
Well, we were, I would say, about 10 feet away at
Oh my gosh.
when they got to their closest. They started us at about 15 feet.
Yeah.
And
Closer than I thought.
but
It is when you think, oh, good, who's behind me?
Yeah. They all left.
you only have to run faster than the slowest person in the group.
Yeah.
They seem to, they watched us, but they seem to just go on with life as they would normally do.
Do they? I assume they see a lot of humans then.
Well, there are, like I said, there are only 13 groups that the park will take you to. There are about 50 groups in all. So the other groups are not experiencing tourism. And the 13 groups that have, it's kind of like in the Galapagos, they have no reason to fear because they have no bad experiences.
And the groups aren't visited every single day. You know, they alternate it.
And you're only there for, 1 hour. So
Long time.
well, it's a long time, but
By the
when-
end,
when they stop to nap and to feed, that's what they usually spend an hour or two in one location. Then they'll take a little walk and feed somewhere else. They spend most of their day eating. Except for the little ones, they play a lot. And sometimes you'll see one of the adults kind of push them away, enough of this.
Yeah. So we saw a very large group, and it was a lot of different ages of gorillas. And Carolyn's son went with us to this portion of the trip. And he decided he wanted to do more hiking and go more into the woods. So he went with another group.
Of younger people.
Because we wanted like the least amount of walking, that would, to see. And in his group, he didn't see any young because it was a new alpha male, and the alpha male killed all the young.
Oh.
What happens is if one of these bachelor males, because they'll stay with the family group until they either get kicked out or they have a desire for female companions. At that point, they get kicked out of the group, and they usually spend quite a bit of time honing their strength and skills, and then they'll challenge an alpha. If they are successful, they take all the females, but all the offspring are not their own offspring. They're the previous alpha's offspring. And so they'll kill them off. And it's not just gorillas that do that. Lions do that as well.
Yeah.
It's not an unusual phenomenon in the wild.
When you say a large group, how many individuals are you talking about?
I think they said the largest group that they have people visit is 18.
Oh, that's a lot.
We saw
Yeah.
about that much.
And we saw at least 15. I actually was too busy watching individuals to kind of count everyone, but
It was a good group.
yeah, it was one male